Chapter 40 won the first shot. The boat ride from Sicily to Rome took less than half a day, and Luke arrived at his destination in no time. Standing on the ship's prow, he could see Italy's capital surrounded by various large and small hills, known as the City of Seven Hills. The walls of the city are irregular in shape, like a crouching lion staring down at the Apennines. Rome City is arguably one of the oldest cities in history, located in the Latin plains of the Apennines in the middle of the Mediterranean. It had experienced two periods, Republic and Empire. It is the birthplace of ancient Roman mythology and has a glorious history and cultural heritage. Luke disembarked from the port in a dignified manner and presented his long prepared documents. His cold face matched his sharp military uniform, exuding the momentum of a superior who just no one can approach. This made it difficult for the soldiers who questioned him, making them unable to examine him too carefully, afraid they would offend this young senior officer. After taking a general look at the documents and checking his identity, they let them go respectfully. If this were Berlin, the Gestapo wouldn't have been so easily fooled. "Dugan, we will succeed in conquering this country and gaining unprecedented glory." Luke entered Rome, the heart of Italy and the center of Mussolini's rule. After winning World War I, the Roman papacy witnessed the strength of the Italian forces led by Mussolini. So, the two sides signed the Lateran Treaty, which recognized Rome as Italy's capital, while the Italian government recognized the Roman papacy's sovereignty over the Vatican. After that, the ambitious Mussolini wasn't satisfied. He led an army to Rome City and declared a union with Nazi Germany to form the Franco-Spanish Axis. Many people thought that Hitler was the founder of the fascist doctrine, but it was Mussolini who opened this Pandora box. To a certain extent, he could be considered the teacher of the Third Reich's Führer. After the First World War, the European landscape was reshuffled, and the people of Italy felt a deep sense of loss over the uneven distribution of benefits after the war. This, coupled with a stagnant domestic economy and a difficult life for the people, Mussolini found a political entry point. He initiated the fascist movement in Milan and established the first Republican fascist party globally. However, this politician, who was bent on being a dictator, was essentially an opportunist. At least in terms of speeches and stirring up emotions, he had no outstanding ability than his student Hitler. Initially, in the Axis camp, Mussolini was on an equal footing with the Third Reich Führer, and even Hitler maintained a respectful attitude toward him. But who knew the Italian army's performance was abysmal, either surrendering, falling without fighting, or calling on the German team members to come to the rescue. Mussolini even summoned Hitler, a student, to help him out when he had problems. The Führer grew to despise this man and almost called him a trash on the phone. Especially after Mussolini was placed under house arrest by the King of Italy and then rescued was by Hitler's special forces. This once ambitious dictator was reduced entirely to a puppet manipulated by Germany. "Captain, you always create miracles that we can't imagine." Dugan stood behind Luke and remarked confidently. After getting along these few days, even if Luke said that he would fly to Berlin, bring Hitler out, and end the war that was sweeping the world, he probably wouldn't doubt it. The two arrived at Venice Square, where Luke gazed at the vast and magnificent palace. That was the Venice Palace, founded by the Pope of Rome. And right now, it's the political center where Mussolini ruled over 40 million Italians in the most heavily guarded part of the city. Tomorrow, the first shot to conquer Italy will be fired here, London, Allied Command, at the secret base of the SSR team. A busy, hot, and tense atmosphere. A month has passed, and the Allied Forces Intelligence Department had begun a fierce battle with Hydra. The spies and agents of both sides are active in the major cities in the rear, such as the Axis powers Berlin and the Allies London, New York, and Poland. People on both sides keep intercepting each other's intelligence. Although the Strategic Science Reserve had gathered all the elites from the Allies, it's still at a disadvantage in the face of Hydra, whose actions were more secretive and powerful. So far, we haven't found the exact location of the Hydra base. Where were the captured Allied soldiers sent? What experiments were the German Nazis conducting in secret? We don't know anything, Colonel Phillips roared loudly, and harsh reprimands echoed in the room, which silenced the people below. In just 1 month, we sacrificed 13 agents, and 4 spies embedded in the Axis countries were discovered. This is the greatest loss the Strategic Scientific Reserve has suffered since its inception. Allied Command is disappointed in us, and I'm disappointed in you. Colonel Phillips was angry, and one of the reasons is he got a call from President Roosevelt yesterday. Although the man in charge of the White House hadn't expressed any opinions about the Strategic Science Reserve, but from his tone of voice, the colonel could recognize the implicit message of accountability. Initially, the Allied forces gradually advanced on the battlefield, and many people felt that the Axis powers had lost their momentum. But no one expected that the Red Skull, who got the Tesseract, used Hydra's scientific reserves to develop potent energy weapons and applied them to guns, tanks, and other heavy weaponry. Powerful technology beyond this era had brought the Axis powers from a state of collapsing to a standstill. The situation of losing ground and falling into disadvantage had also eased. On the contrary, the Allies began to show weakness in Eastern Europe's battlefield, and the established defensive front was in jeopardy. For a series of reasons, the Strategic Science Reserve was under tremendous pressure. They weren't able to figure out the technical basis behind the energy weapons that Hydra has mastered yet. The military factory's exact location and the secret base of Hydra's, they didn't even have the slightest clue. Hydra's agents had long infiltrated the Allies top and bottom, making it impossible to avoid them. This situation made the team led by Colonel Phillips reactive in terms of intelligence. "Have you heard from Luke?" Chapter 42, Capturing Mussolini. "Have you heard from Luke?" After venting his anger, Colonel Phillips turned and looked at Peggy Carter next to him. He could only pin his hopes on Luke's success now. If the raid on Rome is successful, the plan to help the Allies land in Sicily would be successful. Not only will the Allies' morale soar, but the status of the SSR would also rise. I received a telegram from Captain Cavill yesterday. They occupied a naval camp near Sicily. At 3:40 this afternoon, the Allied forces will land on shore with the local mafia's help. This operation is codenamed as Trojan Horse. Carter's meticulously reported. She didn't expect Luke actually to do it. Take a team, go deep into the enemy's hinterland, and raid the leader. Now they were one step away from success. Italy, Rome. Time, 2 p.m. sharp. As Luke approached Venice Square, the first thing that struck him is the magnificent palace on the north side of Capitoline Hill. Once the Pope's residence, the most beautiful building in Rome now fell into Mussolini's hands. The dictator often spoke to the people gathered in the square from the expansive balcony. With the rank of captain, the status of Berlin envoy, and Dum Dugan is standing behind him, which spared him the trouble of being interrogated by the patrolling guards. "When will Mussolini meet us?" Dugan asked in a low voice. "At 4 p.m. when he gets up from his mistress' bed," Luke chuckled. He stood in the square, like a tourist enjoying the scenery. Manelli and the others should be moving soon. Dugan nodded silently. According to the plan, Jimmy, the sniper, had already secured a high point. Kenneth, the gunner, was driving a truck and slowly pulling up to the side of the road, a block away. It contained 20 shooters, carefully selected from mafia members, and a Maxim heavy machine gun. It must have taken Alessandro a lot of hard work to bring that thing in without being found. Next step was for them to attract the Venetian Square guards' attention, create chaos, and create the best opportunity for Luke. "Do you think Mr. Mussolini will be surprised to see us later?" At this time, Luke still remained calm and had the heart to make jokes. Dugan, who stood behind him, couldn't help admiring this calm state of mind. When he thought about what was going to happen next, his legs slightly shook. The time passed by minute. It seemed to go very slowly. "Go in." Luke showed the pass issued by the military and entered the parlors of the Venice Palace. Just after he disappeared from Venice Square, a very abrupt shot broke the peace in Rome, like a boulder crashing into the calm lake, causing unprecedented turmoil. "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" The ear-piercing whistle blew, and a team of patrolling guards sprang into action, while military police quickly surrounded the entire Venice Square in an attempt to find the sniper hiding in the shadows. Another series of gunshots boomed as Kenneth lifted the top off the truck. 20 of the Mafia's best gunmen emerged from it. This heavy fire caught the patrolling guards of Rome by surprise. Kenneth operated the Maxim heavy machine gun according to Luke's command. A long stream of gunfire swept through the crowd of military police and guards, who fell one after another. For a while, it was difficult to break through this deadly web of interwoven bullets. Protect the leader. Luke shouted with excitement and walked out of the parlor without a second thought. At this time, politicians and guards alike couldn't be bothered to distinguish between the enemy and themselves. What's more, Luke is wearing a captain's rank and German military uniform, which was the best pass. The ordinary soldiers didn't dare to stop him, and those senior officers had no extra time to cross-examine and let him walk along the stairs. Captain, Kenneth won't last long. He could hold it for 5 more minutes at most. Dum Dugan, who was following closely behind, gulped, feeling surrounded by enemy troops. That's enough. Luke walked briskly and arrived at Mussolini's office floor with amazing speed. The security here is obviously stricter than the outside, and Nazi soldiers protected the Italian dictator. They wore Hydra armbands and weren't alarmed by the sudden sound of gunfire. On the contrary, Mussolini was closely guarded, even more maintaining basic order. The Nazi soldier stopped an unfamiliar face like Luke for questioning as soon as he rushed up, even though he held the rank of captain in the Third Reich. No passage. State your identity. Luke didn't bother to talk and kicked out. The Nazi soldier who intercepted him suffered a broken sternum and flew backward. Before the rest of the group could react, their necks were cleanly snapped. Create a disturbance and draw fire. Dugan nodded his head when he heard Luke's instructions. He pulled out his pistol and ran further up the stairs while firing a few rounds down the stairs, drawing more guards. Intensive footsteps echoed in the corridor, and Luke strode forward, shouting, "Protect the leader." And the enemy ran upstairs. As he made his way to Mussolini's conference room, he was fully prepared. The Italian dictator had the habit of having afternoon tea at 2 p.m. every day and liked to stay in the third conference room on the corridor's right-hand side. When the mood strikes, he will call his mistress over to vent some of his unbridled energy. The sound of guns shooting kept coming and going. Like a tiger in a herd of sheep, Luke knocked the Nazi soldiers who tried to stop him to the ground. This time, he didn't hold back. Chapter 43, shocking the Allies, shaking the world. The sound of guns shooting kept coming and going. Like a tiger in a herd of sheep, Luke knocked the Nazi soldiers who tried to stop him to the ground. This time, he didn't hold back. After all, it still hurts when a submachine gun bullet hits his body. Luke pinched the hard helmet into scrap metal with 5 fingers folded, and the last opponent fell in front of him. Boom! He kicked open the door of the meeting room. A bald man was sitting in the conference room, his eyes full of horror. A German-made Walther P-38 pistol was aimed at Luke, who broke in. Bang, bang, bang. 3 bullets clearly pierced Luke's German uniform, but no blood flowed out. That's it. Luke took out the flat slug with his hand and grinned with a friendly smile. Hello, Mr. Mussolini. Who are you, liberals, or are you one of those Revolutionary Front guys? Mussolini looked at Luke with the gaze of looking at a monster. Bullets can't penetrate his skin. Luke didn't answer. He went straight over and picked up the Italian dictator as if he were carrying a chicken. I'm an Italian, Pa. With a slap on Mussolini, his face immediately swelled up. This was still the result of Luke's control over his power. I don't care who you are, Mr. Benito Mussolini. Please face the reality of your capture. With a stern look in his eyes, Luke pushed Mussolini onto the balcony where he often gave his speeches. Gunfire broke out in Venice Square, causing chaos. We are taking over the city of Rome. From this moment on, there will be no dictators. No fascist. Luke looked down at the crowd below, and his loud voice carried far away. The sun is shining on his body like a heroic figure from a mythical legend. Telegram, the latest telegram, Allied command in London. The Strategic Science Reserve, which Colonel Phillips sharply reprimanded, was in a gloom state. Everyone didn't even dare to breathe loudly, fearing to provoke the anger of the chief again. At this time, the messenger burst in with great enthusiasm. He was flushed bright red, perhaps too excited, and everything he wanted to say was stuck in his throat. He couldn't spit it out. It's Captain Cavill's telegram. Afterward, a messenger was short of breath, and his face was full of excitement and admiration. What's the fuss about? No proper training. Fuck! Colonel Phillips frowned, yelling at him first, and then reaching for the telegram. When he saw the content, he couldn't help but burst out with a swear word, completely ignoring the majestic image of being the chief. Italy, Rome, at 2:50 Central European Time. Captain Luke Cavell led the Howling Commandos to capture Italy and Mussolini alive. A short sentence made Colonel Phillips freeze in place, as if there was a bolt from the blue exploding in his mind. The impact of this telegram made him suddenly lose his ability to think, and he was silent for a long while. A success, the colonel muttered to himself. It was he who asked Luke to lead the Howling Commandos. He made a great plan to help the Allies land in Sicily and raid Rome. But he actually did it. Colonel Phillips was in disbelief and felt that he was in a dream, one that was full of delusions. In his plan, the best result was actually to sneak into Italy's hinterland and create opportunities for the Allied forces to land ashore. As for capturing Mussolini alive, it was just a temporary addition. It didn't matter much if it couldn't be done. No one expected Luke would give the Allies and Colonel Phillips such a great surprise. Super soldier. Erskine, did you see that? Luke is the best super soldier. Colonel Phillips was so excited that he squeezed the telegram with one hand and pressed the messenger's shoulders with the other. His eyes were a little bit red. Are you sure that this news is true? If word of this gets out, this matter will boost the Allies' morale. Strategic Science Reserve will no longer be subjected to harsh criticism from many sides. The pressure will not only be reduced, but its status will also rise. Everything will be different. The telegram is from Rome, Italy. Absolutely true. The messenger seemed to be infected. His tone was excited, and his voice trembled. There is also a bulletin from the King of Italy deposing Prime Minister Mussolini. Immediately afterwards, the messenger added, "Hurry, inform headquarters. Notify the president. Notify everyone." Colonel Phillips grabbed the telegram and waved his arm vigorously. He was right about Luke. The whole world should know about this fantastic event. The telegraphers were tapping vigorously, sending bundles of electromagnetic waves and quickly transmitted to various places. From England to America, from Churchill's office to Roosevelt's White House. The absurd and unbelievable truthful news was like a flying horse with wings running back and forth across the world. Chapter 44, Soaring Reputation in Venice Palace's bedchamber. The lights were still bright, and the fluttering candlelight reflected the famous oil paintings and extravagant decorations. Different from the previous banquets, full of the laughter of the upper-class guests. Tonight's Venice Palace was very quiet, shrouded in deathly silence. Rescue leader, kill the Americans. Long live Italy, long live the Führer. A few harsh slogans suddenly sounded, accompanied by a burst of fierce gunfire, but quickly calmed down. These kinds of minor disturbances simply didn't arouse any waves. Those fools who are brainwashed by fanatical fascism couldn't really make any waves. Captain, this is the 11th time. Dugan's dark face was full of tension. He hasn't recovered from the successful raid in the afternoon. So far, he couldn't believe it. It was all real. The Italian dictator, the prime minister of a country, Mussolini, who supported the Axis powers and Hitler, unexpectedly became their prisoner. Let other members take turns on duty. The Italian defenders won't attack rashly. Their king is eager to hang Mussolini in the square. Luke kept his composure. Right now, he had Mussolini as a bargaining chip in his hand, and the fascist forces in Rome didn't dare to move. As for the toppled king of Italy and the royal family, they wanted Luke to send Mussolini to the gallows immediately. The king has issued an announcement to depose Prime Minister Mussolini, and the royal family took over the army. 7 gunmen died, and 4 were seriously injured in the raid. The Allied command sent a telegram. The British and the US both want to seize ownership of Italy. The State Department and the Pentagon, the War Department and the Navy Department are all quarreling. Dum-Dum Dugan reported the situation today. Things are going as Luke expected. No matter how the British and Americans argue, this credit belonged to him anyway, and no one could take it away. Luke was excited when he thought of the reputation value that was soaring like a rocket on his character panel. Let them fight to their heart's content. Rome and Mussolini are the chips in our hands. We will sell them to whoever offers the highest price. Luke smiled. He had already made a plan. This isn't a military operation, but an armed kidnapping. When Mussolini fell into his hands, he accomplished the mission. All that remains is a political game between the rising bald eagle and the weakening John Bull. However, these complicated intrigues have nothing to do with Luke himself, and he wasn't interested. Luke wants a Medal of Honor that belonged to a war hero and a massive amount of reputation. Italians have a good attitude. The king is a wise man. He immediately ousted Mussolini and ignored Venice Palace's occupation because they wanted to show goodwill to the Allies. Luke saw clearly that howling commandos alone wouldn't be able to stop the Roman garrison. However, there weren't as many fascist forces loyal to Mussolini and Axis countries as imagined. This is Luke's reason for staying in the Venice Palace. Behind him are the Allied troops who had already landed in Sicily. Everything is as you said. Dugan sincerely admired it. Even though he won a fantastic victory, the Howling Commando's young captain wasn't carried away and remained unfazed and calm. However, who are we going to sell Italy to? Dugan asked again. His voice trembled slightly because Luke's thoughts directly determined the future of the Howling Commandos. We, of course, are giving President Roosevelt this critical chip. Luke didn't take long to think about it and quickly gave his answer. The most re-elected president in the history of the United States of America was a powerful and flexible person to work with. Moreover, the president sitting in the White House needs an outstanding contribution from luck to shut up the public's mouth. After all, no one can deny that Roosevelt did play tricks in the presidential campaign and deceived all the voters. If they get the credit for capturing Italy, the other side will surely be grateful for the goodwill Luke passed on. It looks like tomorrow Allied Command will be able to send someone to take over. Dugan nodded. Now he listened to Luke's every word. One victory after another has established the young captain's authority in the team. Who would have thought that an unknown 6-member team would have made this fantastic and legendary achievement? Send a telegram to the White House and wait for the president's message. Luke ordered it down. From the moment Dugan sent the telegram of victory to Allied Command, the reputation refresh notifications didn't stop. Side quest, Flowers and Glory, the war hero's second step. Completed, requirements, reputation value reached 8,000 points. Achieved, reward, Bane skill card, back-breaking expert, obtained. Luke crossed off the completed task, but didn't expect the second one to pop up right away. Side quests, legendary name, the war hero's third step. Completed, requirements, reputation value reached 20,000 points. Achieved, reward, one chance to draw Superman card obtained. Then the third task, the fourth. Luke tilted his head and looked up at the deep night sky, revealing a satisfied smile. He was about to draw a new Superman card. Chapter 45, Rewards, New Mission. To Luke's surprise, the quest completion notice kept popping up. One by one, the rewards gave off a soft light in the item column. This time, he led a team to raid Rome and captured Mussolini alive in an armed operation. He initially expected to receive over 400,000 reputation points. According to the development of the events and the publicity efforts at a later period, breaking the million cap shouldn't be a problem. It was foreseeable that, when Luke's name spread around the world and was regarded as a legendary figure of the Allied forces, his reputation would welcome a surge. Luke preferred this efficient method rather than toiling to complete quests and slowly accumulate reputation values. What a bountiful harvest, he thought to himself. When he opens the shop in the future, he will exchange skill cards and props without worry. This thought made him a little happy. Anyway, there are quest rewards. Luke's mind drifted. All of the 5 War Hero series of side quests were completed. In addition to the Scarecrow's Fear Gas, Bane's back-breaking expert skill card, and Superman card lucky draw opportunity, Poison Ivy's Phenomenon perfume, Joker's laughing gas, and Constantine's silk cut cigarettes were also provided as quest rewards. Generally speaking, the most valuable thing was undoubtedly the lucky draw opportunity. One can be randomly selected from numerous Superman cards as a reward. In the past life, Luke felt that he had a great chance of winning Silver Age Superman and Superboy Prime. When that happens, not to mention Thanos, the director of the Universal Family Planning Commission, even Odin, the Allfather, or Thor, who had opened his Rune King form, would tremble. However, the latter rewards had more trolling effects than actual use. Poison Ivy's pheromone perfume can increase one's attractiveness to the opposite sex. Note, the effect is better between people of the same sex. This is aphrodisiac perfume. Luke looked speechless. What can I do with this? As for Joker's laughing gas and Constantine's silk-cut cigarette, the former is laughing until the muscles convulse and twitching all over. Taking too much will quickly lead to death. The latter is just a tiny amount of nicotine for your lungs. It will bring you a little closer to lung cancer. After browsing the quest rewards, Luke opened the character panel and the data had changed host. Luke Cavill loaded card. Superman LV1 abilities. Stellar energy passive. Bioforce field passive reputation. 451,024 task list. Open the Path of Heroes side quests. Completed achievement. Legendary hero. Lines of information appeared on his retina. Luke's mind moved slightly, sweeping over it. Your name will be written in the history books and passed down for centuries, enhancing the host's leadership and influence. Not bad. Luke, who saw the results, was delighted. This hidden aura of charisma sometimes played an unexpectedly crucial role. The lucky draw. This kind of thing should be done on an auspicious day with good background music. Otherwise, it won't feel right. Luke thought for a moment and decided to save the lucky draw for the day when the president presented the medal. Borrowing the president's good luck, this would be a home run. With a beautiful thought, Luke walked into the washroom. Instead of lying down in the vast and luxurious hot spring bath, he simply washed his muscular body with cold water. Blocks of well-defined muscles, like hard rocks, revealed his masculinity. His whole body seemed to be carved out of marble, majestic and fit. Explosive power filled within. Sure enough, my eyes feel sour. Luke sighed as he braced his hands against the wall. He closed his eyes, giving up trying to use heat vision. According to the setting, the stellar energy Superman absorbed typically was stored in the billion trillion cells in his body and could be released through his eyes when necessary. From burning up a planet to sealing a wound, it all depended on the user's control and the energy in the body. Maybe Luke hadn't loaded the card long enough, and he hadn't absorbed enough astral energy. It was hard for him to draw heat into his eyes as Superman did. However, when he thought about it carefully, Clark Kent seemed to have learned this trick only after becoming an adult. Luke's heart felt a little more satisfied. 10 minutes later, Luke, who was recognized as a conqueror by Italy and declared a legendary hero by the Allies, came out wearing a white bathrobe. When he saw the medieval sword hanging on the wall, he couldn't help but think about testing it. Mussolini hit him in the chest with a 9mm bullet without causing any harm. He wondered if this medieval sword, an overwhelming metal squeal followed by its sharp edge flashing with cold light, could break his skin. Luke took it off and slashed it hard at his arm. Clank! The sound of metal clashing and bending echoed. The intricately carved medieval sword collided with Luke's bulging muscles, emitting a crisp sound of metal crashing. An overwhelming metal squeal followed this, and with a screech sound, the well-crafted medieval sword broke apart. On Luke's bulging arm muscles, there was only a superficial scratch that recovered instantly. Even under the wave of his mighty power, the medieval sword didn't cause any damage. It seems that no one can stop me in the battlefields of World War II. Luke leaned against the bed and picked up the book, Il Principe, written by Italian thinker Niccolo Machiavelli. Unfortunately, Mussolini didn't learn how to turn Italy into a powerful centralized country, but advocated totalitarianism and became a dictator who everyone wanted to shout at and beat up. Main quest: opening of the third camp, Hellfire Club. Requirements: extract mutant gene fragments, 05. Completing this quest will complete the prerequisite for opening the Celestials event. Reward: leech serum, ×5. A few lines of information suddenly appeared in front of Luke's eyes. He still kept reading, but his auditory senses were at the maximum, scanning the whole bedroom like radar. Generally speaking, the quest will start only after contacting important plot characters or getting information on crucial plots. Luke is the only one in the large bedroom, yet he received a quest reminder. There was no doubt that there's a mutant in the same room with him. Chapter 46 Mutants. Hellfire Club. Luke knew this organization. Its establishment could be traced back to the 18th century. It mainly recorded and investigated some mysterious events, such as vampires, werewolves, and witches. Later, it gradually became a social place for elites from all walks of life, especially inviting famous scientists and influential rich and famous people. On the whole, Hellfire Club at this stage was quite normal. It was not until a German scientist named Sebastian Shaw joined that it became a premier organization for exceptional people mutants. However, the Hellfire Club occasionally invited the world's top people. For example, Howard Stark, who later presided over SHIELD and took Stark Industries to greater heights. "You've been hiding there for so long, aren't you going to come out?" Luke put down his book, his right hand clenched into a fist, his muscles tense, and apparent traces of a vein emerged. Boom! His fist swung at the air. The air seemed to be squeezed by a heavy force, and a sound of a shocking explosion erupted. Visible to the naked eye, the air rippled like a cannonball shot. Tons of terrifying power poured out. Outside the bedroom, the open-air balcony was suddenly torn apart. Rubble went flying. A transparent figure was lifted off by the aftershock and smashed heavily against the wall, spitting out a mouthful of blood. "You're a mutant too?" Hearing this question, Luke chuckled and shook his head, saying, "Not everyone who shows something special is your compatriot, standing in your side." "You know the existence of mutants?" At the corner, a thin man with a black scar on his face stood up and stared at Luke with his cold eyes. That punch formed a booming wave of air, like a solid cannonball smashing out. The mere aftermath of the wave lifted him off the ground. In terms of physical strength alone, the skinny man had never seen a more terrible existence than this allied captain. "I'm curious who sent you." "Sebastian Shaw." Luke didn't answer the others' questions, but threw out a name. Sebastian Shaw, the Black King of the Hellfire Club, had the powerful ability to absorb energy and turn it to his advantage. If the skinny man came from Hellfire Club, he was sure to have heard of this name. "Do you know Mr. Shaw?" "Well, Captain Cavill, it doesn't matter how much you know about mutants." The thin man smiled coldly, and his figure abruptly became distorted and blurred. Like putting on a layer of optical camouflage cloak, he disappeared instantly. The luxurious bedroom was so quiet that one could hear a needle falling on the ground. Luke stood expressionlessly. His white bathrobe opened, revealing his solid muscles. He wasn't surprised that mutants would appear in World War II. According to the timeline, the leader of one of the two future mutant camps, Magneto, who founded the Brotherhood, should still be a child, still imprisoned in the dreadful Auschwitz concentration camp. Young Magneto once met a crazy Nazi scientist, Sebastian Shaw, who later became the Black King. This person firmly believed in the Aryan master race, theory concocted by SS leader Hitler. He agreed with Hitler's extremist approach of cleaning up the inferior race and creating a superior race. After returning from studying in Britain, Shaw, who specialized in genetic engineering, was quickly recruited into the German army's scientific department. As his talent gradually reveals itself, he slowly gains importance and gets involved in managing concentration camp projects, becoming a ruthless, scientific butcher. All the imprisoned Jews were Sebastian Shaw's living experiment subjects. He tried to study the human genetic code's profound meaning and thus find the key to unlock the evolution gates. It was one day in 1944 that changed Sebastian Shaw's fate. On a rainy afternoon, as usual, he stood by the window with his coffee. He watched the Jews and Polish people being herded into camps like cattle. A young boy attracted Sebastian Shaw's attention. He watched with his own eyes as the other party cried out in anger while using both his hands to twist an iron gate from a distance. Several strong soldiers couldn't stop it. Sebastian felt like he had found the key to unlocking the door to human evolution. Later, he did learn that there is a superior race of people on Earth, superior to human beings, unique to the Germanic race. They were called mutants. The name came from an American dwarf scientist. When Sebastian Shaw was studying in England, he had read the papers written by the other party. The dwarf scientist firmly believed that many people in the world were more potent and more talented than human beings. So, Sebastian Shaw launched a series of studies on the still young Magneto and finally discovered the mystery of the mutant's ability, the X gene, a string of divine secret codes that seemed to be implanted in the human body by the guards. The Hellfire Club mutants came in to rescue Mussolini. It seems that Hydra had finally noticed me. Chapter 47, Superman's suit makes its debut. Extra chapter for reaching the hidden Power Stone goal. Luke collected his thoughts with a playful look in his eyes. The invisible, thin man moved carefully, with his natural ability to distort light, change skin color, and blend in with his surroundings. No matter how powerful you are, you need to find me first. I was just careless before. The thin man, nicknamed Chameleon, pulled out a sharp dagger. He felt that Luke discovered his existence solely because of a random coincidence. I've infiltrated so many military sites, stolen intelligence, assassinated dignitaries, and never made a mistake. The thin man's eyes looked cold, like a viper that eats people. He quietly approached Luke, ready to slice his throat. Go to hell. The thin man moved like a cat on the soft carpet, leaving no trace. He held his breath, not making a sound. The dagger in his hand flung out and stabbed Luke, who was still standing still. You can hide your steps and your breath, but you can't hide your heartbeat, even if it's faint. Luke sneered, and his body shifted slightly. The dagger stabbed his chest, emitting the clank sound of metal colliding. The sharp dagger made of carbon steel couldn't pierce Luke's skin, only leaving a shallow scar. It soon recovered. The force that bounced back made his arm numb. How is this possible? The skinny man exclaimed. It's a pity he didn't see the fantastic scene of Luke testing his defense with a medieval sword. Otherwise, he would never have thought that he could kill his opponent with a dagger. Crack! Luke smiled, raised his hand, and twisted off the carbon alloy dagger. He then lifted the thin man effortlessly. Tell me what I want to know. I might let you live. The other side obviously looked gentle, but his voice was like the Siberian air, making people shiver. Meeting those cold eyes, the thin man's mouth opened and closed in fear, wanting to say everything he knew. Da-da-da, da-da-da, the sound of gunfire from a submachine gun reached Luke's ears. He could tell that the sound came from the direction of the dungeons. It seems that you have companions. I'm sorry, you're useless now. Luke casually threw the skinny man off the destroyed balcony as if he was a sandbag. Accompanied by a shrill cry, the mutant trailed a graceful arc in the air. A few moments later, the dull sound of a heavy object hitting the ground could be heard. Let's see what mutants look like here. There was a smile on the corners of Luke's mouth, and his thoughts moved slightly. Wear the suit. To protect himself, he still chose to wear the Kryptonian uniform he got for free, which could increase his defenses a little bit. Who knew what kinds of mutants there were? What if his opponent had laser vision, which is even more potent than heat vision? This Superman is obviously powerful but overly cautious. Luke complained. A bit of light spread out. A steel armor-like nano-suit covered his tall body. It didn't have the sort of Superman on his chest, which is the L family's unique symbol. In its place, there was a golden emblem shaped like a dazzling sun. The dark red cloak behind him resembled a fluttering flag. Although the cloak has no practicality, looking fabulous is a lifelong thing. Looking at the tall and upright figure reflected in the mirror, Luke sighed. Fortunately, it wasn't the awkward Golden Age look with the underwear. Otherwise, he wouldn't have worn his suit. Opening the tall, heavy doors of the bedroom casually, from below the quiet Venice Palace, he could hear the sound of fierce gunfire. In the dungeon's Venice Palace, the howling commandos are facing an unprecedented battle. On the battlefield, their opponents were Nazi soldiers, armored troops, and heavily armed Axis forces. And now, their enemy was an anomaly, a monster that couldn't be perceived with common sense. In the tunnel of the dungeon, a sturdy man nearly 2 meters tall stood. His whole body is covered in steel-like skin, reflecting a silvery glow. A bullet storm swept through, only to send sparks across his body. Kenneth, shove that fucking magazine over here. With a fierce look on his face, Dugan threw away the empty magazine of his submachine gun. That damn Iron Man, at most, will only be hit back a few steps by the momentum of the bullets. If they wanted to deal some damage on him, they had to use something more powerful. Moreover, in addition to the Steel Man, there's a red-skinned and slender-tailed, devil-like monster. He can appear out of thin air like a ghost, and then disappear quickly. Those mafia gunmen who kept outside the dungeons were taken to the sky by the Red Devil. Then they were let go, thrown down. The sound of the human bodies falling was like a bag full of water hitting the ground, hitting hard with a muffled bang. Bone, flesh, and blood were stirred into a sludge-like mass that made people want to vomit. In addition to these two terrifying intruders, There's a woman in leather who releases toxins, and a dozen strengthened fighters wearing Hydra armbands. They sneaked into Venice Palace by diving in low altitude. The 20 elite gunmen recruited by the Mafia were no match for these anomalies. If not for the terrain's advantage, the narrow tunnel would only allow two people to walk side by side. The Howling Commandos used fierce firepower to form a bullet storm. Fearfully, they might have already been wiped out by the group long ago. There's no way to inform the captain. Captain Cavill may not be able to fight against these people. Manelli's face looked grave. Unless a fully armed and armored unit is mobilized, covering a large area with firepower, it won't be possible to kill these abnormal people with their abilities. Chapter 48 Superman's suit makes its debut, Aye and Azazel. At least the Prime Minister is going with us to the grave. Sniper Jimmy turned to look at Mussolini in the dungeon and smiled. A large caliber bullet was shot from the muzzle of his gun. The penetrating force that could have lifted the enemy's skull hit the burly man with steel-like muscles, instantly making a big hole. But despairingly, the outer metal filled the puncture wound like melted liquid. In just a few breaths, the sturdy body with a silvery luster was restored. I thought the captain was enough of a monster, and I didn't think this world was this crazy. Manelli smiled bitterly. He was like the Germans who saw tanks for the first time in the Battle of Somme in World War I. Faced with such a steel monster, human beings had no chance of victory, and it was even more challenging to have the courage to fight it. Kill Mussolini when necessary. Never let them succeed. Dugan grabbed a submachine gun and went on another shooting spree. Unfortunately, it didn't cause any damage. At most, it formed some insignificant disturbance. Tied up in the back and locked in a dungeon, Mussolini had a happy expression. He knew that Hitler, who was far away in Berlin, Germany, had been conducting superhuman research. He just didn't know the specifics. He never thought there would be such talented people in the Axis powers. Wait, something is going on outside. Dugan, nicknamed Dum Dum, is ready to die for his country. The Howling Commandos were veterans who have fought many battles, so naturally they weren't afraid to die. It's a shame that they died in a foreign country when they were about to be honored by the president as war heroes, with flowers and glory. Boom, a loud noise. When the members of the Howling Commandos were ready to die in sacrifice, the earth-shattering sound, like cannon fire, echoed through the dungeon. A rustle of dust fell from the brick's cracks and filled the tunnel, causing Dugan to cough. Outside the dungeon, it was as if a giant beast was walking. Every step it took would trigger an alarming commotion. What's going on? The steel man at the front turned his head and asked, "Did the Allies drive their tanks into the Venice Palace?" Boom. The earth trembled, and it seemed like a hurricane was rolling outside. A strengthened warrior wearing a Hydra armband flew into the thick wall in a blur. The bricks shattered, and debris flew. Flesh and blood of the strengthened warriors injected with the defective serum looked like they had been put into a juicer. They were crushed and smashed an instant, painting a scarlet and harsh abstract picture. The whole scene looked as if a tomato was thrown hard at the wall. Immediately afterward, the second, the third, one by one, the strengthened fighters who were guarding the dungeon's exterior were smashed through the hole in the wall. The violent painting smeared with flesh and blood is getting brighter and brighter. Is that the Allied captain? It looks like chameleon mist. Useless piece of shit. The devil with red skin and a long, slender tail rolled his eyes and spoke with contempt. His name is Azazel, nicknamed Satan, and he is also a member of the Hellfire Club, one of Sebastian Shaw's men. I'm going to handle the guy outside. You guys take Mussolini back. He's the one the Führer in Berlin asked for by name. The Satan, Azazel, hummed softly. As a mutant, he had always been pretentious and despised ordinary human beings. Most of the mutants who join the Hellfire Club have been discriminated against and hurt by other people, so they were easily brainwashed by Sebastian Shaw's set of racial theory. They believed in the radical statement that mutants are the future and humans are the lower class. Mutants were superior to humans. Ironically, the leader of this group, Sebastian Shaw, wasn't a mutant at all. That crazy Nazi scientist only activated the recessive X gene in his body through organ transplantation, thus gaining abilities. Strictly speaking, Sebastian Shaw isn't a mutant. At most, he's a modified human who stole mutant powers, The red figure, like a wisp of smoke, abruptly dissipated. Then he appeared in front of Luke. That chameleon's ability, although. Boom. Before Satan Azazel could finish his words, a powerful punch was thrown. The turbulent airflow, like an empty wave, rolled up the dust. Such a frightening sound, Azazel quickly shut his mouth. His body instantly disappeared and moved to a distance. Is this guy a mutant? Looking at the crumbling ground, where the compressed air flow had blown a big hole, the Satan, Azazel had palpitations. He asked the same question as to the chameleon. In this era, the understanding of super-powered people is still limited to mutants. You're the Superman who captured Mussolini alive and conquered Italy? Azazel asked with a sneer. Superman? There was a look of surprise in Luke's eyes. When had he ever been called that? You're the super soldier from the Allies. The world is buzzing with the legendary story of you leading a team that infiltrated the city of Rome, conquered Italy, and captured the dictator alive. Roosevelt and Churchill said that you have the powers beyond those mere mortals and create amazing miracles that no one could imagine. Azazel appeared to be a bit disdainful, lightly snorted and said, Now the Allies are calling you Superman, saying that you will lead the Allies to victory. Luke couldn't help but laugh in his heart after hearing this. He didn't expect that he got the title by mistake. Superman of the Marvel world. Now this was exciting. Chapter 49, Superman Vs. Azazel. Thank you for your kind words, but that's the end of the farce for tonight. Luke put away his smile and looked cold. Then he suddenly rushed out. The hard ground opened up with fine cracks like spider webs. The dark red cloak was lifted, and in less than a second Luke arrived in front of Azazel. The tall body was like a wall, crushing straight forward. The terrifying wind pressure emitted a hissing whistle. Too fast. With Azazel's reaction speed, it would have been impossible for him to dodge. But with an alert sense of danger, the red figure dissipated like smoke, avoiding Luke's head-on charge. When did such monsters appear in the Allied forces? Azazel moved to a higher altitude. Then he flickered several times, pulling away by a considerable distance. It seems that this is the only way for him to regain a sense of security. Like a humanoid Tyrannosaurus Rex, Luke left a deep impression on the Azazel. The other side just waved his fist. With his bulging muscles, it could cause the air pressure to roar. This shows how terrifying his physical strength was. Unless it's Mr. Shaw. Otherwise, it would be impossible to block the power of the punch head-on. Azazel made a judgment. His long, slender tail curled around a sharp dagger, and his eyes flashed with a hint of murderous intent. As long as it's human, there will always be a weakness. The Allied captain doesn't look like a mutant. Otherwise, he would have reacted emotionally to seeing himself. There's nothing to be afraid of if I'm careful to avoid his fists. Azazel looked at Luke, who was looking at him with cold eyes, and he inexplicably developed an inflated sense of I can do it, and I'm good. With a few quick instantaneous moves, he got closer to the Allied captain. The sharp inverted triangle tail was like another arm extended from his body. It didn't only maintain good balance, but could also handle weapons flexibly. A sharp dagger stabbed Luke in the back of the head. You're too slow. Luke heard the wind whistling behind him and spoke with a cold expression. His right leg flew like an iron whip, twisting the air around it, kicking Azazel in the head. Before he could come near, Azazel could feel the strong wind. As if a gigantic wave was rolling through, the momentum was unbelievable. The air was like a barrel of gunpowder being ignited, emitting an explosive boom. Satan smiled smugly and disappeared, letting the terrifying whip-like kick fall short. This is just a feint to get Luke's attention. After the smoke condensed and flashed twice, Azazel suddenly appeared. The sharp dagger with the tail curling around it jabbed straight at Luke's neck. As I said, you're too slow. Luke's eyes flickered slightly and he turned his head. His left solid arm directly flew over. Ding, ding. The sharp dagger poked his neck but rebounded violently. While Azazel was stuck, Luke grabbed his slender tail. With a strong pull, Azazel couldn't resist and was pulled over. Luke pulled the tail with his left hand and punched with his right, sending an uppercut straight at his chin. When the uppercut made contact with Satan's chin, Azazel felt a loud buzz in his head. It was like a dull thunderbolt that struck directly into the skull. After a sharp pain, the whole person lost consciousness. If Azazel could see himself, he would cry out and think of plastic surgery. His jawline was crushed and cracked. Half of his face looked like it had been blown up like a gunpowder barrel. All his teeth had fallen out. His cheeks were torn through, and you could barely see his original appearance. The blood that covered his face was like an open faucet, flowing out in a torrent. This miraculous amount of bleeding made people wonder if he would die outright due to excessive blood loss. Frankly speaking, Azazel is still alive because of his strong physique and a certain degree of healing ability. "This is only 30% of my power," Luke said gently, and then he pulled the tail again and pulled back Azazel, who had fallen to the ground. As if he was a flying insect entangled in a spider's thread, the deficient mutant fell into Luke's hands. His 5 fingers folded, like iron tongs, gripping Azazel's neck. So much for mutants. Hearing Luke's comment, out of mutant pride, Satan instinctively wanted to refute a few words. However, he felt that the hand gripping his neck was gradually tightening. A suffocating pressure forced him to shut up. Falling into the clutches of this allied captain, for the first time, Azazel felt that life was so fragile. As long as Luke squeezed a little more harder, he would finally say goodbye to this world. Not to mention escaping with teleportation. Right now, Azazel didn't even dare to think of moving for fear of provoking the other's murderous heart. It's not bad. Luke picked up Azazel like a dead dog and strode to the dungeon. The battle outside had long attracted the attention of other mutants. However, they didn't think any terrible opponent could threaten the shadowy and ghostly Azazel. These mutants in World War II haven't seen superheroes that sprang up in later generations. They naturally had a shallow vision, thinking that they were the future rules of the world. If they were brilliant, they wouldn't be brainwashed by Sebastian Shaw. Azazel. The leather-clad woman who was releasing poisons couldn't help but exclaim when she saw Azazel. With a slight lift of her hand, a mass of green fog gushed over. The leather-clad woman's ability was to release nerve gas, causing a wide range of indiscriminate lethal attacks. The howling commandos in the tunnel wouldn't have lasted so long if it had not been for Mussolini's survival. Not a good idea. Luke's expression was unchanged and unafraid. With one step, the ground shook. His upright figure closed in on the leather-clad woman in an instant. The green smoke was blown away by a surge of air before it got close. A hand slashed lightly hit her neck. The opponent's neck immediately slacked as if it had been broken. Both eyes went dull and fell straight down. The battle ended faster than anyone could have imagined. Chapter 50, Crushing Defeat of Mutants. The woman in leather, who could have played a considerable role in the battlefield, couldn't make a move in front of Luke before she was cleanly put down. "You are so incompetent." A sturdy man whose body is made of steel, with a strong Russian accent, spoke contemptuously. This was the Soviet Colossus. Luke couldn't help but wonder why he became a subordinate for Sebastian Shaw, a Nazi scientist. Aren't you afraid of being sent to Siberia to grow potatoes? If they are all incompetent, how strong can you be? Luke threw down the Satan Azazel in his hand and stomped on both of his opponent's legs. Crack, crack. The sounds of bones cracking and Azazel's painful cry echoed clearly in the dungeon. The crowd who witnessed this scene couldn't help but feel their scalps go numb. "You can try to escape, but remember, don't let me catch you. I won't be as gentle as I am now." Luke lowered his head and looked down at the shivering Azazel. The latter slumped to the ground. The severe pain made his body twitch involuntarily. Looking up at Luke, who looked incredibly tall, Azazel shook his head vigorously. His miserable face was filled with fear. He didn't even want to try and see if he could use teleport to escape. This extremely young allied captain was so mighty that people can't rise against him at all. You think you are invulnerable to guns and weapons, and no one can beat you. Seeing the big and strong man striding forward, Luke greeted him without fear. The two of them collided with each other. It was like Mars colliding with Earth. Boom! The turbulent airflow filled the narrow tunnel. The whole place seemed to shake, and Dugan, hiding behind a Maxim machine gun, stood unsteadily and fell on his behind. He looked shocked and turned his head to say, "I really want to know now if that Steve Rogers guy is like the captain." Such horror. Manelli had the same horrified look on his face, feeling that his captain was beyond the realm of human. The rest of the howling commandos were utterly shocked by Luke's horrific power. Witnessing a real battle and watching someone lift an SUV were two different things. At least, the impact is very different. Not bad. It's rare to find a sandbag like you. Luke showed a hint of appreciation. With a steel-like body that even a bullet couldn't penetrate, he collided with the sturdy man. It was as if hit with a hammer, emitting an ear-splitting dull sound. This is one of the few opponents who can compete with his strength. You! The sturdy man's eyes were wide, and he was speechless. For the first time since he awakened to his powers at the age of 17, he felt pain, his sore and numb arms trembling slightly. This man is a monster. A similar thought occurred to the burly man, as it did to several of his teammates. Then he saw Luke laugh and say with excitement, "Again." "Don't come here." Before the big man could speak, Luke shook his fist and concentrated his whole body on one point. Dong! Like a bronze bell ringing, the big burly man was sent flying, leaving a straight trail through the thick walls of the dungeon. A violent noise shook the surrounding space, almost causing the solid tunnel to cave in. The howling commandos, who were watching the battle from the sidelines, have already retreated towards deeper passages of the dungeon with a very horrified Mussolini in tow. They don't want to be buried alive. Getting involved in this level of fighting usually didn't end well. "What kind of monster are you?" The sturdy man with a steel body staggered to his feet with his arms supporting his body. Boom, boom, boom. Luke, striding in, followed closely behind, 3 punches in a row. Before the liquid metal surface could recover its body, the terrifying force struck again. "I think that." The words of the softly yielding man were blocked back by the power of the punches. The big strong sank deep into a hole in the ground. Like a pile driver on full throttle, Luke hammered like crazy. Gradually, the metal shell that covered the body's surface could no longer take shape, turning into a silvery liquid. The sturdy man's mouth and nose were spilled with wisps of bright red blood. His eyes are empty and devoid of spirit, losing the color of life. "Ah, sorry. I was having a bit of a good time and couldn't stop." Luke stopped swinging and said with some regret, "It's only 17 punches. I thought you could at least take 20 punches from me before you die." Fortunately, the big strong man who sank in the hole had his body firmly embedded in the ground and couldn't hear this sentence. Otherwise, there was a good chance that he would vomit blood and die again. As he watched the liquid-like metal disappear, Luke sighed and lifted his foot to stomp on the burly man's chest. Chapter 51, Enraged Axis. "I'm pissed off." At Hydra's secret base, the leader, Red Skull, put on his earpiece and let the Third Reich head yell at him. Allies captured Italy, Mussolini was arrested alive, and then Allies landed in Sicily. Once again, Allies leveled the Axis hard-fought advantage. The Führer could no longer maintain his demeanor in the face of the Allies' high morale, and the fallen ones, and cursed like a shrew. A bunch of waste. Trash. In the end, the Führer, who was far away in Berlin, ended the conversation with his famous words. Red Skull was livid and put the phone down heavily. "Pa!" The earpiece was crushed straight into a pile of parts by him. Zai, 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 sparks of electricity jumped onto his skin, but he was unaffected by them. Sebastian Shaw is such a waste. He's touting the mutants as powerful, but he can't even get rid of a team of less than 30 people. Red Skull threw the Führer's reprimand to Sebastian Shaw at Auschwitz. He sent out all his strengthened fighters and even the mutants of Hellfire Club, but they failed to rescue Mussolini successfully and suffered mass destruction. This is a result that Red Skull could never have imagined. The Allies' legendary hero, the young captain, called Superman. Is he that powerful? The Red Skull, who was also a super soldier, was somewhat unconvinced. He is the first super soldier created by Dr. Abraham Erskine and couldn't have been more aware of the power he possessed. The Allies must have hidden other secret weapons. One man captured Italy and caused Rome to fall. This is a rumor concocted by the Allies, should not to be believed. With a sneer, Red Skull then walked up to a metal instrument. There was a magnificent cube in it, and it emitted a faint blue light. The energy faintly fluctuates, rolling through the metal instrument's pipes and flowing to an unknown place. The Allied forces Superman and Sebastian's mutants are doomed to be eliminated. I have been given the power to become a god. How can Hitler's Aryan master race be compared with the treasures of Odin's treasury? Red Skull gazes at the cube with an obsessive look in his eyes. He believed that all those old myths were actually facts that had happened. It is only through word of mouth and artistic manipulation that it had gradually spread and evolved into what it is today. It so happens that the Führer, whom the Red Skull once worshipped, was also a staunch supporter of the occult. Influenced by his idol, the Red Skull, injected with the serum to become a super soldier, embarked on a quest along with the mythology of Northern Europe in search of the precious gems lost in Odin's treasury. Finally, he found the Tesseract in a church in Norway. The Third Reich has hindered the development of Hydra. We can no longer obey Hitler's orders. Do you think I am right, Dr. Zola? Red Skull turned his head towards a short, middle-aged man named Hydra's Science Department's chief researcher. The particular instrument for extracting the energy of the Tesseract was his masterpiece. Hail Hydra, Dr. Zola replied wisely. He is a scientist, not a Nazi, and inspirational ideas influenced him. Hydra, under the leadership of Red Skull, was gradually breaking away from the control of the Third Reich. Anyone else who received the Führer's furious reprimand would have been scared out of their wits, fearing that they would be arrested by the Gestapo and thrown into prison to experience a brutal punishment. But Red Skull didn't panic, holding the Tesseract and providing energy weapons for the Third Reich, and he is now a crucial, indispensable chip for the Axis powers. Without the enormous multi-turreted tanks that were so invincible on the battlefield, and the energy guns that can turn a human body into flying ash without hitting it dead-on, the Soviets would have invaded Berlin. Mr. Schmidt, the Allied side, Dr. Zola asked carefully. Now the only thing that the Axis powers have to resist the Allied Superman is probably Hydra. The Führer himself called in, undoubtedly hoping that Red Skull would solve this problem and discourage the Allies. Superman is not to be feared. Hydra, with the Tesseract and the technology at its core, is the ruler of the world. The Valkyrie project is our focus, Red Skull said dismissively, not giving any thought to the legendary figure promoted by the Allies. Then he delivered an impassioned speech. As the former head of the Third Reich, he looked to the future of the world. Silently, Dr. Zola stared at the portrait in the corner, a skull with exfoliated skin shaped like a red skeleton. This was the true face of the Red Skull. Usually, he used an elaborate mask that concealed this appalling face. What about Sebastian Shaw, who cherishes his fellow mutants and will be devastated to lose 4 of them at once? The alliance we have forged with him may be affected. Dr. Zola lowered his head and asked softly, if Hellfire Club is looking for trouble, Sebastian Shaw should look for the Allies' Superman. What does it have to do with me? Red Skull said contemptuously. Are my strengthened fighters not more valuable than his fellow freaks? It's stupid to want to grab power with a bunch of freaks. Human beings are the most rejecting creatures globally, and Sebastian Shaw's mutants will be on everyone's radar once they take to the world stage. Besides, I no longer need to ally with him. The power demonstrated by the Tesseract had already made Red Skull dream of world domination. He no longer needed the Third Reich, and he no longer needed mutants. For the world will soon be in the hands of Hydra. Chapter 52, Sebastian Shaw. Auschwitz concentration camp, Poland. Sebastian Shaw is sitting behind a desk. He was the manager of this death factory. The soothing music, slowly flowing out of the phonograph, echoed indoors. In this concentration camp, where a large number of Jews, Poles, and Soviet prisoners were held, people die every day, buried alive, shot, poisoned, and vivisected, in various ways. The officers stationed in the concentration camp regarded it as a playground and enjoyed themselves by killing people at will. Sebastian Shaw never stopped nor participated in it. He is a scientist, and his goal is to seek out the essence and pursue the truth. Sebastian Shaw prefers researching killing. It has been his long-cherished wish to find the genetic code, the key to evolution. Influenced by Hitler, Sebastian Shaw once thought that the blonde Germanic people were the most superior blood on Earth. However, after profoundly participating in the so-called Aryan Master Race project, he was disappointed. The Master Race, claimed by the Führer, is not Germanic. They are no different from Jews and Poles, neither stronger or smarter. Lancashire is the key to a new era, Sebastian Shaw said softly. Ever since he found that little boy called Eric Lancashire, he seems to have opened the door to a new world. The superhuman-like theory, in which we used to believe, has finally been confirmed. There are indeed better races on this planet than humans. They are pioneers on the road of evolution and gifted powers. As far away as the United States, Dr. Bolivar Trask, who also studies genetic inheritance, called this group mutants. It is believed that their genes, as if being implanted with a series of magical codes, were on a completely different path from human beings. But unfortunately, Dr. Trask is unwilling to talk about the secrets of their X gene. This made Sebastian Shaw a little disappointed, but fortunately, he had a natural mutant who could be used as a reference. So, like a ravenous, hungry wolf, the mad scientist sought to extract more treasures from the mutants. Especially after triggering Eric Laneshare's natural ability, he began to conduct continuous experiments to investigate the differences between mutant genes and normal human beings. The prisoners in Auschwitz concentration camp had become the best living test subjects. Cold-blooded mad scientists were much more frightening than those Nazi butchers. All things come to those who wait. Sebastian Shaw found a way to stimulate the mutant gene. That is painful torture, coupled with a highly harsh living environment. It was possible to awaken the recessive X gene in the human body, although the success rate is meager. But when you don't care about human life, reaping a significant number will eventually give results. In this way, Sebastian Shaw produced a group of genetically modified individuals. Like Chameleon and Poison Woman belong to this category. They have also recruited many genetic mutants under the guise of compatriots. Azazel, the Satan, is one of them. For Sebastian Shaw himself, he used the safer method of organ transplantation. Genetically engineered mutants were vivisected, their organs removed, and transplanted into his own body. As long as the transplant rejection is solved, he could transform into a mutant without a problem. As it turns out, Sebastian Shaw's crazy idea was right, and he did it. This is the power that God has given me. Sebastian Shaw, with his hands on the desk, had a look of triumph in his eyes. He felt that every cell in his body was full of vitality, and he grew younger and stronger from gradual aging. His withered muscles became increasingly full. Mr. Shaw, Ileana says she's lost her link to Chameleon, Colossus, and the rest of them. His subordinate knocked on the door and told Sebastian Shaw the terrible news. The mad scientist's eyes changed dramatically as he reveled in the satisfaction of his work, giving off a cold, violent, and frightening aura. His subordinate quickly bowed his head. His legs trembled, afraid to incur the other party's anger. "How did that happen?" Sebastian Shaw asked angrily. Ileana is a genetic mutant he found with a rare psychic ability, be able to leave a spiritual mark on 3 to 5 people and feel their existence at any time. Disconnecting means that someone has erased the mental marker or killed them. Either way, Sebastian Shaw wasn't happy with the outcome. Every mutant is his precious treasure, and no one is allowed to damage them but himself. Damn Hydra! I should have known better than to agree with Red Skull's request. Sebastian Shaw was furious as he stared at the Allied newspaper on his desk, with its headlines about Roosevelt and Churchill calling the Italian conqueror Superman. Superman! We'll meet sooner or later. Let me see what you can do. A few days later at noon. Several jeeps drove slowly into Venice Square. Colonel Phillips and Peggy Carter were on board. This round square, covered with white marble and located in Rome's center, was surrounded by the Italian garrison. They surrounded Venice Palace towering on one side of the square, even setting up machine guns. It's no wonder that the Italians are making such a big fuss about it. A few days ago, Venice Palace had a big commotion, which almost made the Italian king think that it was Allied tanks entering the city, and the Air Force bombed it. So he got out of bed in the middle of the night and stayed up worried all night. When it was later revealed that Hitler had sent an attempt to rescue Mussolini, the royal family hastily mobilized its troops and surrounded Venice Palace in the name of protection. It seems like Captain Cavill scared the Italians to death. Colonel Phillips said with the attitude of a winner. He opened the car door, got off, and looked at Venice Palace. All the others looked towards the balcony on the first floor. Mussolini once lived there and delivered a famous balcony speech. And to the Italian people, he spoke those stirring words, promising a seemingly bright future. Now the dictator was overthrown, and the country chose to surrender. All the good things have gone up in smoke. Venice Square is gradually crowded with Italian people. A moment later, a tall and straight figure came out, standing on the balcony in the open air, carrying in his hand the Italian dictator who was no longer as powerful as before. Once a commanding and untouchable man, Mussolini was brought up like a battered moppet, with his shoulders slumped in humiliation. He looked at Luke with hatred and fear. It was this young Allied captain who ended his dictatorship. Chapter 53 News. Luke's team had burst into Venice Palace and defeated all the guards and Hitler's rescue party. The ruler of Italy was reduced to a prisoner of a minor captain. The silence of the square was soon replaced by a cheer, followed by a tsunami of applause. Wave after wave of sound spread from one block to the next, centered at Venice Square and extending to all directions. Free Italy! Long live freedom! Down with the dictator! Step down, Mussolini! Hang him! Hang the demon! Such slogans continued to emerge amidst the earnest and solemn cheers as more people began to gather in Venice Square. They all looked excited. They raised their arms in the air and shouted. Mussolini's dictatorship led to the prevalence of fascism. Food was controlled, freedom of speech was prohibited, people took to the streets to demonstrate every day, and work strikes never ceased. Therefore, in the eyes of these miserable people, Luke wasn't a hateful aggressor, but a great hero who liberated this country from the dictator. Well, it was very much in keeping with the Italians' admiration for valiance. It was a good decision. Luke was pleased to see the reputation on his character panel, refreshing like a waterfall. Between proactive attack and passive completion of quests, he prefers the latter. The cheering crowd gradually dispersed. Colonel Phillips took Carter into Venice Palace. The howling commandos put away the heavy machine guns in the hall, waiting for relief from friendly forces. It's been a long time, Luke. Colonel Phillips' calm expression can no longer be maintained, and he held Luke's palm excitedly. He looked as if he couldn't wait to have his picture taken and be in the Allied publications with such a legend. You didn't let me down. The President has a lot of praise for you. He's going to present you with a reward as soon as you return to New York. Colonel Phillips leaned close to Luke's ear and whispered the news. Carter's beautiful eyes flickered aside. She didn't think that the young man from Brooklyn, who she met at the Stark Industrial Expo, would one day become a war hero for the Allies. There was nothing more wonderful than this. Under the direction of the American military, Luke's name had spread all over the Allied forces, and his legendary deed is deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Compared with Captain America, who became a household name by selling Barnes on stage and performing in a costume, Luke, who sneaked into the base camp behind enemy lines and made remarkable achievements, is more manageable for soldiers to recognize. I only made a small contribution to the Allies' victory in the war, just like every soldier on the front lines. Luke's modest response to Colonel Phillips' compliment was more than appreciated. A soldier who can remain calm in the face of applause and flowers is the right choice for a general. The night arrived, slowly draping like a thin veil. After a fierce battle, Venice Palace was cleaned by the Italians and transformed if you ignore the bedchambers, ruined balcony, and the collapsed dungeons. The punctured walls, which looked like a hive, had been repainted and decorated with even more beautiful carvings. With its blood-stained patches, the marble floor had been cleaned and swept, shiny as a mirror. The dislodged crystal chandelier, damaged oil paintings, and broken railings had all been repaired and replaced. Soothing music flows through the air of Venice Palace. The royalty, dignitaries, rich and powerful, came in all their finery as if they were rushing to a ball. The protagonist of this banquet was naturally Luke, in his crisp military uniform. Everyone was curious to know what this war hero, who led a team alone, breached Rome, and liberated Italy, looked like. They were not disappointed when they saw Luke, a tall man with a straight back. He looked like a heroic figure from Greek mythology with his calm face and dark eyes, impressing everyone. Although the Allied captain was still very young, his momentum was no less than that of the nobles and dignitaries present, and no one dared to look down on him, not ruling out the possibility that this is the effect of the legendary hero achievement. Guess what the Allies are going to promote you to? The guests and the host enjoyed each other's company as if leaving the war behind. Luke entertained a group of royals and dignitaries before being pulled aside by Colonel Phillips at his leisure. Colonel. Or Lieutenant Colonel. Luke is holding a glass of champagne with a light smile on his face. I'm too young. Even though I have a solid track record, I still lack qualifications. It should be noted that the most famous general in American history, Douglas MacArthur, was only promoted to Major General at the age of 45. Luke knew in heart that neither the military nor the president would be able to promote him too high all at once. First of all, it will lead to criticism and dissatisfaction. Secondly, it was challenging to convince people. After all, he had no foundation right now. Being a war hero was not enough to sway the various leaders of the military, not to mention that a false name like hero can be made up and worthless. At first, you were going to be decorated as a colonel, and a colonel under the age of 20 is plenty enough, but Colonel Philip's old face showed a happy smile. The Italians disagree. Especially in the royal family, if a mere colonel conquered Rome, they would be disgraced. The Italian government would never accept it. A colonel with less than 30 people dared to break into Rome, openly kidnapped Mussolini, scared 40 million people, and lived in Venice Palace to give orders like a king. It was humiliating, and it would make Italy a laughingstock. So, Luke was surprised and raised an eyebrow, but the result was beyond his expectation. "Congratulations, Luke, on becoming the youngest general in U.S. military history," Colonel Phillips replied. Chapter 54, End of Banquet. This is an unprecedented honor. Colonel Phillips seemed to be more excited than Luke himself. His old face is full of pride and triumph. A general at the age of 20. What a speedy advancement. Luke won't only be recorded in history as a war hero in the future, perhaps prefaced by the title of the youngest general in the United States history. "You have created a surprise for me and everyone," Colonel Phillips exclaimed. Generally speaking, being promoted to a general at the age of 30 may be said to be young and promising. Famous generals in American history like Douglas MacArthur and Dwight Eisenhower were in their 40s before they reached that position. The former was regarded as a legend of his generation. The latter retired, served as president, and successfully entered the White House. You can imagine what a great future Luke, a brigadier general, has ahead of him. Many people regarded Luke as a rising star. Of course, some believed that the so-called Superman was just a second Captain America, the new military mascot. How could the Allied command agree? Luke was surprised, too. If it weren't for the fact that this was a time of war, a heroic figure was desperately needed, and his own merits were beyond reproach. This would be considered the biggest shady thing in the history of the military. The Allies had a heated discussion for this purpose, but in the end, they were unable to overcome the firm position of the Italian government. After all, it concerns a country's reputation. When people talk about this matter in the future, the first thing that people would think of is how incompetent the Italian army was. To let only an Allied captain take his troop and break through Rome's heavily fortified city. To save their reputation, the Italian government even shamelessly said that if the Allies didn't give a reasonable reward to the war hero, they would choose to award Luke Cavill the general's rank unilaterally. The two sides kept arguing. Allied command had to hold its nose and acknowledge Luke's work because of Italy's strong request and the rogue stance. They promoted a 20-year-old soldier who had been in the army for less than 2 months to brigadier general's rank. The compromises made by the Allies have finally brought an end to this behind-the-scenes fiasco. The Italians are not satisfied. They were so greedy that they even wanted you to assume the marshal's seat, which would leave them their dignity. Colonel Phillips whispered, with a hint of sarcasm in his tone. To save Italy's pride, it was ridiculous to promote a young man under the age of 20 to a 5-star general or field marshal. They are the ones who surrendered, and they aren't the winners. It's hard to beat the high ground, Colonel. Thank the President for his kindness. Luke didn't say much. The harvest was a pleasant surprise. His foundation wasn't solid enough, and the qualifications weren't deep enough. It's futile to sit in any high position. I will give Mussolini to Italy, and the credit for the capture of Rome and Sicily to Dwight Eisenhower, who, as I recall, is the highest commander of the Allied forces in Europe, as a good deed. Luke spoke in an orderly way, apparently not carried away by the sudden honor. Colonel Phillips nodded appreciatively. Eisenhower's reputation within the military was now soaring. He led 100,000 British and American troops to land in the French North African colonies in 3 different locations. Under cover by the powerful Air Force, they occupied Algiers, Oran, and Casablanca in Morocco. They immediately advanced westwards to form a pincer movement against the German and Italian allies retreating into Tunisia. Eisenhower's command and action put the German and Italian troops in a dilemma, and finally, 250,000 people surrendered, which was a surprising victory. This great victory eased the Allied forces' setbacks in Eastern Europe and put the Axis countries at a disadvantage. General Eisenhower will remember your kindness. He appreciates you very much. Colonel Phillips couldn't help admiring Luke's vision. What he lacked now were the foundation and the support behind it. And Eisenhower, whose reputation was growing day by day, would undoubtedly be a perfect ally. Luke smiled faintly, remembering that in the original history, it was Eisenhower who had launched the attack on Sicily. Before long, he was awarded the honorary rank of a 5-star general by the Allies. Even later, Eisenhower took part in the presidential election and was re-elected for 2 terms, making him an outstanding military man and politician. After chatting with Colonel Phillips, Luke went to the terrace of Venice Palace alone. The cold night breeze blew by, the night sky was dotted with stars, and the moon's silvery glow fell on the earth. "Why are you hiding here alone?" In her red evening gown, Carter approaches Luke, who was alone with his thoughts. "It's a bit noisy in there, and I wanted some quiet time. What's more, I don't want to be offered alcohol again." Luke leaned against the balcony and smiled. Under the bustling night sky, the couple began to chat. "Miss Carter, do you know what Steve is doing?" Chapter 55, Meeting with Carter. Luke thought of Captain America. At this time, the other party should still be selling bonds on the stage and touring around. He has made films, acted with the senator, and recently published a personal comic strip. "Rogers is much more popular than you," Carter chuckled. She seemed to remember Camp Lehigh. Luke and Rogers had the best friendship. Later, they both became super soldiers together, but with very different outcomes. "In about 3 days, the Howling Commandos and I will depart for New York. I'll recommend the army to have Steve brought in with me." Luke said to himself. He is no longer a third-rate soldier at the beck and call of others, but has gained a measure of authority. If the committee of politicians wanted to dictate him, they are not qualified. He would be very grateful to you. With her arms clasped around her chest, Carter said, "Those Italian ladies are looking at you with such enthusiasm, as if they want to eat you like a dessert after dinner." Luke is the center of attention at the banquet. Carter could always hear the women talking about how they wanted to make the war hero who liberated Italy their guest. "I know. A beautiful lady stopped me in the hallway and said she would like to thank me for liberating Italy, overthrowing the dictator, and asking me to visit her room." "It looks like you didn't go to her room, still regretting it." Carter's brow furrowed, and her attitude turned cold. She couldn't quite make the connection between the slightly frivolous young man in front of her and the Allies' legendary hero. Of course, any man who refuses such an invitation can't help but feel sorry for himself. Luke said with honesty, "Miss Carter, don't look at me with contempt. Even a war hero couldn't hate a beautiful girl who throws herself at him. It's human nature. You should admire my honesty and not think of me as a womanizer. Brigadier General Cavill, you are better at sophistry than the politicians on the committee." The red-dressed and gorgeous female agent said sarcastically, "It's the art of the language, Miss Carter. Many friends have suggested that people who can talk like me should publish a book after the war. It should be called From Private to General in 2 months. P.S. The youngest general in the United States uses his personal experience to teach you how to reach the top in life. What do you think?" Luke was like a flamboyant prodigal son, not as steady as he was during the day, much to Carter's disgust. "Well, chit-chat time is over, and I have to go and visit Miss Esau's room. Have a lovely evening, Miss Carter." Luke smiled as the atmosphere stiffened. Holding the champagne in his hand, he turned and left. Behind him, Carter looked annoyed. Her feminine instincts are telling her that this was not Luke's true colors. But why did he do this? 2 days later, Luke, dressed in a brigadier general's uniform, rushed off the ship. As he stepped onto the ground of Palermo's port, the empty harbor was crowded with mafia men who had come to greet him. A mob of fierce, suit-clad thugs, led by Alessandro, lined up in a row. Eisenhower's Anglo-American coalition forces have taken over Italy and carried out encirclement and suppression activities against those who tried to revive the fascist, just as Mussolini swept away the mafia. The tables have turned, and now the mafia retaliated. "General, Glancing at Luke's epaulets and the ostentation and extravagance behind him, Alessandro changed his address carefully. This mafia leader, still with that humble look, was even more respectful than before. Following Luke may be the best decision he has made in his life. 2 weeks ago, the other party was only an allied captain, and now he had been promoted to brigadier general. The speed of this promotion was like riding a rocket. Moreover, Luke is now recognized as a war hero by the allied forces, a legend who led his team to conquer Italy. Such a sensational event will be talked about for centuries to come. Alessandro thought that he could appear in it, which was no different from being a part of history. What an honor for a gangster to receive such a privilege. MS Mailner is still at the hotel and is preparing to give you a warm welcome when she heard of your return to Sicily. Alessandro bends slightly. Knowing that the times are different, his attitude towards Mailner showed some respect. Why didn't she come to the port? Luke looked up and looked out at the crowd outside the dock. Many people were eager to see the legendary man whom Roosevelt and Churchill called Superman looked like. MS Mailner said that it was inconvenient for her to appear in public with the general. Alessandro bowed his head. Luke's eyes flickered for a moment, and the corners of his mouth lifted as he whispered, I see. Casa, are you happy with your life now? Very happy. The new constable who had just arrived in town was respectful, and the governor of Palermo also visited me yesterday. All thanks to you. Alessandro nodded his head. He has acquired both power and status. In Sicily nowadays, anyone who sees him takes off their hat and says, sir, with respect. Even the bosses of the Camorra family. Luke looked around at the fierce mafia members and spoke as he walked away. I can give you another chance to choose. After the end of the dispute, the Allies had different opinions about what to do with Italy. The United States thought that Italy should be entrusted to the United Nations, while the British were only interested in the overseas colonies and wanted to gobble up the pie, and the Soviets thought it would be safer to have a joint trusteeship between the three countries. For the time being, no one can convince anyone. Alessandro frowned in contemplation as the future of the country dictated the future path of the mafia. Luke continued, whatever the outcome, the mafia is destined to fall. You are just a product of a period of social instability, and once the order is restored, the state will crack down on it. Just like when Mussolini came to power, he attacked you in order to win public opinion. Casa, I am certain of your ability, so you can choose to stay in Sicily and continue to enjoy life as a family manager. Or come with me to North America, where there will be more opportunities. As soon as Luke finished, he looked at him as if he were resting and waiting for an answer. Chapter 56 Plans for Vegas. Casa, I am certain of your ability, so you can choose to stay in Sicily and continue to enjoy life as a family manager. Or come with me to North America, where there will be more opportunities. As soon as Luke finished, he looked at him as if he were resting and waiting for an answer. Alessandro's eyes wavered as he considered the situation. There were no words to the hotel, but he was reluctant to make a decision. General, it is a great honor for me to follow you. Luke stepped out of the limo and smiled, saying nothing more. Luke returned to New York with the Howling Commandos, this time without living in the old house in Brooklyn. Instead, he was greeted by a high-ranking official and moved into a luxurious room of a hotel. This is the world's first skyscraper hotel and has a rich history. At the time of its construction, President Hoover made a memorable speech in the Cabinet Office of the White House to congratulate. As he said, the Waldorf Astoria is a benchmark in New York, a constant favorite of dignitaries, and a witness to many historic and important events. At the end of World War II, the representatives of the four victorious powers, the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, signed the World Peace Agreement in a suite room in its towers. The tower has been home to the King of Monaco, Queen Elizabeth I and her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Today, like many celebrities, Luke has the privilege of staying in a tower suite at the Waldorf Astoria. This is really. Mailner looks up at the bright crystal chandeliers and the luxurious furnishings as if she has fallen into a dream. It never occurred to her that she would be able to live in a place like this one day, coming from the Sicilian countryside. The happiness came so suddenly that Mailner couldn't believe it. Moreover, no man would stare at her with undisguised greed now. All this because she was Luke's lover. Power and status provided shelter to a poor woman whose fate was supposed to be miserable. You can stay here for the time being, and Casa will keep you safe. Luke leans back onto the soft sofa, and Maleness sits on his lap. Alessandro took about 300 people with him and followed them from Sicily to the strange continent of North America. Their compatriots have already made a name for themselves, visiting all sorts of high-profile venues, meeting politicians and Hollywood stars. I never believed in gangsters, but sometimes they can do your dirty work for you. The mafia, who had come across the sea to the United States, had no one else to turn to, so they had to cling to me as their supporter. Luke sniffed at the scent of the alluring woman's hair and said lazily, "He is now a brigadier general, and having defeated the Axis and Hydra, he may become the youngest major general in the United Nations history. But status is not everything. It needs to be supported by money, connections, and well-established interests. The mafia could be a cornerstone of this particular period." Luke had his sights set on Las Vegas, Nevada, a gold mine that could be mined. In the early years of the Great Depression, the Nevada legislature passed a bill to legalize gambling to stimulate the economy and tide the country. Since then, Las Vegas has become a city, but not as well known as later generations. Luke, a former member of the Irish mob, didn't want to get into the lucrative business of smuggling and drugs. That would cause a lot of unnecessary trouble, and in the end, it might even turn out to be an embarrassing situation where he would have to keep wiping the mafia's ass. Gambling, hotels, and the security industry in Las Vegas were areas where the mafia would compete. Taking advantage of the fact that the city hasn't developed, he should get involved. First, it should be a pleasant surprise. In the original timeline, Las Vegas was originally built by Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, an American mobster who raised $6 million to build the Flamingo Hotel and Casino, which attracted tycoons from all over the world. "You can always see the bigger picture," Maleness said adoringly. A moment later, she was lowered onto the sofa. Her black, wavy hair spreads out like a lotus flower, and her beautiful face tinged with a hint of blush. "It's still light out," Maleness said faintly. "Don't get me wrong. I just thought the sofa was very soft and wanted to test the quality." Luke's words were soft, but his hands moved nimbly. Later, people heard faint car honking like sounds through the hotel's floor-to-ceiling windows. Chapter 57, Presidential Awards. After settling down, Luke spent the next few days in a variety of social situations. From the press conferences held by the White House to the celebratory dinners of the military departments, he attended every single one. He never stopped running around like a spinning top. Everyone that saw him was smiling, laughing, and admiring him. The atmosphere was harmonious that Luke almost had the misleading impression that they had won the war. According to the movie plot, if Captain America hadn't stopped Red Skull and Hydra's bombing plan, the Allies might not have won so smoothly. "I'm very honored to present this Medal of Honor, symbolizing bravery and fearlessness, to Brigadier General Luke Cavill. He is a hero of the Allies and our hero." On the lawn of the White House, President Roosevelt, in a wheelchair, pinned the medal representing the highest military honor on Luke's chest. After that, they shook hands warmly and took a group photo. It looks like the headlines of all the newspapers tomorrow would be news about this matter. "Although I heard that you are very young, I didn't expect you to be this young. You know, when I was your age, all I could think about was how to talk to the best girl in school." After the ceremony, it was a luncheon at the White House, and the accompanying staff pushed the president to Luke's side. As the longest-serving and highly regarded leader in United States history, he knew how to bring people closer together. During the whole conversation, the president only talked about Luke's parents' untimely death, the difficult time at school, and Uncle Frank. He behaved like a gentle and kind elder, not a person in a position of power. "I only made a small contribution, no different from the soldiers on the battlefield. Luke is no pushover when it comes to pretty words. Politicians always like to beat around the bush. Even politicians like Roosevelt were no exception. Dwight and I are very grateful for your gift. Luke, can I call you that? I have seen many excellent young people, but you're still the best among them." The president finally got down to business, smiled, and said, "What should I do for you in return?" The war isn't over yet, and it's difficult to determine the distribution of many interests. Your position is enough to attract attention, and it will be challenging to move up the ladder. I want to go back to the battlefield and end this war with my own hands. Luke just threw the words out, without the slightest hint of lying. For him, the position of Brigadier General isn't enough. While the war wasn't over, it was the key to seize the time to make achievements. Although Roosevelt was polite to him now, when the dust of World War II settles, the other party will definitely treat him as a passerby if Luke has no further use except for the halo of honor on top of his head. By the way, if nothing else, the president who uses a wheelchair will probably die of a cerebral hemorrhage before the war comes to a complete end. In this way, Truman, as the vice president, was the one worth investing in. Luke had a series of thoughts in his head. The president, who was waiting to write a bunch of bad checks, paused. Why didn't this young brigadier play his cards according to usual practice? Obviously, it was time to promise benefits, win over relationships, reap gratitude, and accept it as a confidant. How did it become a righteous initiative to fight? Then I'll contact the Allied command, the president said dryly. Luke, who was watching the other party leave, withdrew his smile. He set a goal long ago not to be the mascot of the federal government. Neither politicians nor capitalist groups will be able to buy him. Who would want to be subservient to others? Luke held the champagne in his hand and pulled a sneer on his lips. Brigadier General, sir, I'm a reporter for the Daily Bugle. Can I take a picture? The young reporter saw the president left. He did not stop the entourage and rushed over. He laboriously carried a heavy camera and looked at Luke with an expectant face. The Daily Bugle. So this newspaper was that old. Luke raised an eyebrow and stood up straight with a friendly and polite smile on his face. Yes. Click. With a flash, the picture was taken. Young Brigadier General's straight posture and handsome face would be spread worldwide along with the printed newspapers. You don't look thrilled, Steve, no. I should call you Captain America. Who will take care of the Germans? The star spangled man with a plan Editor note. Link for this song is in paragraph comment here. When Luke met Rogers, it had been a week since he returned to New York. On the other side, Allied command finally agreed that the young general who wanted to go to the front line leave for the battlefield. Luke, who had some time to spare, took the time to visit his old friend. He even hummed the familiar tune that was well known in the streets. It's just that Rogers didn't seem very happy to hear this song, so he turned his head in shame and said, Don't make fun of me, Luke, or do you want me to call you Superman too? Backstage at the Broadway Theater, Captain America, dressed in a tight-fitting costume and carrying a star-spangled shield in his hand, had a frustrated look on his face. There was no more determination and fighting spirit as before. He had become the senator's tool to sell war bonds. Everyday life was all about working with promotions, performing on stage, and then taking pictures together, saying the same old lines, doing the same old actions like a machine. You are the hero of comic books and movies, the Captain America that everyone admires. Luke tapped his partner on the shoulder and deliberately said so. They just need an idol, a clown on a stage. You're the hero of the real world. By the way, I haven't congratulated you yet, General Cavill. Rogers shook his head, cheered up, and squeezed out a smile and said so. He joined the army in the first place to make his own contribution to the war, just like the soldiers on the front line, instead of acting like a clown, standing on stage, saying meaningless strings, and promoting various state bonds. Chapter 58, Using the Lucky Draw. I thought you'd like the feeling of being a big star on Broadway and having people know you everywhere you go. Luke hooked Rogers' neck with his arm and said so with a smile. But you've changed a lot. Used to have to bend down to reach your shoulders. Rogers turned his face away, ignored his friend's teasing, and wearily said, You know, the last time I went camping Lehigh in New Jersey where we stayed, all the soldiers were talking about you, your experiences in training, and your legendary deeds. Really, I'm happy for you and proud of you. Luke, you deserve this honor. I wanted to tell them that you were my friend. But I'm afraid the soldiers would ask, Why are you at the front and I'm hiding behind? Rogers, who was called Captain America, laughed in self-mockery. He was tired of his current life but couldn't resist. Obeying orders is the first duty of a soldier. The senator obtained the military's consent, and Rogers had to do as he was told. Then you can come to Europe with me. Luke also took Rogers's shoulder as before, like they were in Brooklyn, and delivered the surprising news in a lighter tone. Europe, really? Rogers reacted after a few seconds with a skeptical look on his face. But what about the military? The senator won't agree. Soon, Rogers' eyes dimmed again. He knew Luke was trying to help him, but it would be insufficient to get in trouble for that. Senator Brandt has a good position in the committee and had a good relationship with the military. Hey, Brooklyn's little man, you're standing in front of a brigadier general, a hero of the Allied forces, and a rising star who the president has decorated. Luke pretended to be annoyed, frowned, and severely stated his title. Before he drove here, he went to see Senator Brandt. When he heard about Luke's intent, the arrogant senator didn't say a word. He simply agreed. Before Luke left, the other party even begged him not to pursue the matter, almost groveling. Is the true nature of politicians. It was bullying the weak, fearing the tough, following the direction of the wind. So, Captain America, do you want to go to the European battlefield and see how powerful Hydra is with me? Hearing Luke's invitation, Rogers suddenly nodded, his eyes full of excitement. He felt that he had a new hope for his life. Thank you, Luke, Rogers said gratefully. You should call me General. Luke chuckled and took Captain America away from the Broadway theater. Let's go. Let's have a drink. Celebrate Captain America's new life and our reunion. The two figures had their arms on each other's shoulders, laughing and joking as they walked up the street and disappeared into the crowd. Late at night, the stars dotted the sky. Waldorf Astoria, Tower Suite. In the dark and expansive bedroom, only Mailner's even breathing could be heard. This charming, mature woman had her cheeks blushing. It was as if she had just finished some intense exercise and was dragging her tired body to dreamland. Time for the lucky draw. Luke, who stayed awake, didn't show any signs of fatigue. Gently, he pulled out his right arm, which Mailner used as a pillow. Lifting the thin blanket which covers both of them, his naked body stood out of bed. Before long, the sound of water came from the bathroom. Two guys who can't get drunk ran to the pub, and it was indeed very boring. A few minutes later, Luke wore a bathrobe, opened the French windows, and went outside. The cold night breeze blew by, and suddenly there was a refreshing, relaxed feeling. After leaving the Broadway theater in the afternoon, he and Rogers went to Old Joseph's Tavern in Brooklyn to catch up with each other, which attracted a lot of attention. One is a war hero and legend. One is Captain America, should be considered a national icon. The citizens of New York got wind of it and packed Old Joseph's Tavern. Anyway, in the end, the old cliché of reuniting with old friends, thinking about the future, and remembering the past, turned into a tasteless drinking contest. The sound of glasses clinking, the smell of malt floating around, and the occasional burst of laughter over some vulgar, dirty jokes. The atmosphere was so hot that people would think that there was an adult show being performed inside. Like Rogers, I've forgotten what it's like to be drunk. Luke sighed with emotion. Later, when he and Rogers walked out of the pub, it was already the first light outside, and the night flew away. They were conscious, not drunk, and walked without even shaking. As for the guys who were competing in drinks, one by one, they all collapsed on the table, some directly on the ground, making a mess of the pub. Old Joseph told the boys to clean up and throw them all out on the street. Anyway, it's not a big deal to be a bum for one night. For the super soldier, the serum injected into the body would form a protective system for regeneration and healing. Mere alcohol wouldn't paralyze Rogers. He was frozen for 70 years, and nothing happened. In other words, ordinary people would have become dry corpses. As for Luke, it might take 1,000-year-old vintage mead from Asgard to make him feel a little drunk. The two of them chatted for a few minutes and then went home. Later, Luke and Mailner had another pleasant and in-depth cordial exchange to promote physical and mental health. After a full day, he finally remembered that there was another chance to extract a Superman card. Open the lucky draw. Luke, who felt the fantastic night breeze, slightly moved his thoughts. In his mind, a light flashed. The many cards floating in the air were spinning rapidly. Every short pause would tug at Luke's emotions and make his heart beat faster. Silver Superman. This can be our. Luke looked at the Superman template with the silver border and couldn't help but get excited. Why did it pass? That. Cosmic Armor Superman. Another compelling Superman card drifted by. until the speed of rotation slowed down and stopped altogether. Card extraction completed. Magic Superman Etrigan, Super Demon. Chapter 59 Rescue Mission. Card extraction completed. Magic Superman Etrigan, Super Demon. This is not a surprise, also not very disappointing. At least there wasn't anything useless. Luke paused first and then smiled. So isn't one of Superman's flaws the lack of magic resistance made up for? In the future, when I get the opportunity to meet the Sorcerer Supreme, I won't be powerless. Etrigan, also known as Super Demon, is Superman's counterpart in Earth 13, the occult Earth. Compared to Superman, who has zero magic resistance, he didn't have a weakness in this area. On the contrary, Super Demon can also control flames, harness energy, and resist mind control. This was a good harvest. Luke replaced the Superman card with the drawn one, and the data in the character panel suddenly changed host. Luke Cavill loaded card. Super Demon LV1 abilities. Nature Extraction active, Psychic Immunity passive, Stellar Energy passive, Bio-Force Field passive reputation. 1,645,374 achievement. Legendary hero. A Superman who can also use magic. Feels quite weird. Luke loaded a brand new card and felt a lot of information pouring into his mind. He spread out his palm, the air around him fluctuated, and a blazing flame floated quietly. The so-called nature extraction was to extract magic elements wandering around in space. The magical power of the physical world feels very weak. No wonder those sorcerers gained great power through various supernatural beings as a medium. Luke extinguished the flame in his hand and said to himself, sorcerers in the Marvel world had to draw power from other dimensions or sign contracts with other beings. For example, at Kama Taj, established by the Sorcerer Supreme. The source of power for those temple sorcerers is the mystical trinity known as the Vishanti. Many Darkholders were servants of the ancient demon god Than. He created vampires. The Scarlet Witch's chaos magic was also directly related to Than. There was also Dormammu in the Dark Dimension, Mephisto in the Hell World, and Sitorak, the master of the Crimson Universe. They were a bunch of dimensional demons rejected by the physical world or unwelcomed. Making up for the shortcomings is a good thing. Luke felt the surging power in his body and whispered, I wonder if there will be a Superman who eats kryptonite or a super Kryptonian in the future. The following day, Luke, who was ready to go, hadn't yet set out for the battlefield in Europe when he heard the bad news of the Allies' defeat. To make matters worse, Rogers, who had packed everything up and was in an enthusiastic mood, saw the list of casualties of the 107th Infantry. Among them was his good friend, James Buchanan Barnes. Maybe Bucky was just captured, still alive and waiting to be rescued. Luke patted Rogers' shoulder and said comfortingly, General Cavill, Allied Command won't approve of this rescue operation. From their side, Carter reminded them, the area where the 107th Infantry was fighting happens to be the most heavily guarded area on the European battlefield. Forcing a rescue could result in more casualties. Hearing Carter says this, and Rogers was a bit torn. He wanted to rescue Bucky to confirm whether the other party was still alive, but didn't want to cause unnecessary losses to the Allies. No need to bother Allied Command or mobilize other forces. This rescue operation, only Rogers and I are enough. Luke said faintly. He had long wanted to approach Hydra's Red Skull to see if he could open more quests. General Cavill, you are now a hero of the Allies, and if you are captured or suffer an accident, it will shake the morale on the front lines. Carter was anxious and tried to stop him. Because of the conversation at Venice Palace that night, her attitude toward Luke had changed to one of indifference. But considering the consequences of losing him to the enemy, Carter had to come forward to persuade. The Allies' war hero, the legendary figure that the American military has heavily promoted in case he got into an accident, would lead to severe consequences. Ms. Carter, you probably don't know me well enough. I like challenging tasks, and I am good at creating miracles. Luke ignored the other party's persuasion. He looked at Rogers, smiled, and said, Ready for an adventure? The latter looked at Carter with apologetic eyes, and then nodded at Luke. Ready, General. Rogers raised his right hand and saluted. Under the cover of darkness, a Beech UC-43 light transport plane flew into Austrian airspace. Editor/note. Check paragraph comment for Beach UC-43. Under the cover of darkness, a Beach UC-43 light transport plane flew into Austrian airspace. The ground was bombarded with endless artillery fire, which from time to time illuminated the dense forest below. The extended mountains on both sides are covered with dense fog, and the visibility was extremely low. Flying a plane in such lousy weather required a lot of skill on the part of the pilot. Hydra's camp is in Klossberg. The specific location is between two mountain ranges. There are about 2 military factories. The number of guards is about 600 people. Carter took out a map at the back of the cabin and explained patiently with her head down. Although it is said that there was a course on map recognition in military topography, Luke and Rogers might not have studied it. When they were in Camp Lehigh, they were primarily engaged in high-intensity physical training. Is the information accurate? Rogers couldn't help asking, but he got a dirty look from Carter. This is the intelligence that the Strategic Science Reserve painstakingly intercepted from Hydra. During World War II, Austria was annexed by Nazi Germany and joined the war with the Allies to support the front line and prevent the continuous advance of Allied troops. Hydra established a secret base in Klossberg specifically for manufacturing energy weapons and strengthening fighters. Results have proven to be remarkable. The 107th Infantry's assault force, more than 200 men, was defeated by a few Hydra soldiers, led by a few enhanced soldiers. According to the Strategic Science Reserve's Intelligence Department, it was very likely that the captured Allied soldiers would be escorted to Klossberg as labor and experimental subjects. I thought you would report this to Colonel Phillips and have the Allied command give instructions to stop my rescue operation. Luke, who was sitting in the back of the cabin, laughed. Chapter 60, Saving Bucky I thought you would report this to Colonel Phillips and have the Allied command give instructions to stop my rescue operation. Luke, who was sitting in the back of the cabin, laughed. I'm not a cold-blooded person, General Cavill. Carter brushed up a drooping hair, looked up, and told him so. I don't want to see soldiers sacrificed either, but if we're going to win a war, we have to look at the big picture. Don't let your emotions get the better of you. Luke raised an eyebrow and gently said, So why is Miss Carter willing to help us? The original plan was for him and Rogers to drive into Klossberg and raid the military factory. After creating chaos, they will make an opportunity to rescue Bucky or captured soldiers. But later, Carter also decided to join, along with a genius scientist who could even fly a plane. Howard Stark, you said you were good at creating miracles. I want to know if it's true, Carter replied coldly. Sitting on one side, Rogers' eyes wavered as he felt that Luke and Carter seemed to be in a bit of a tit-for-tat. Have they had an unpleasant misunderstanding before? Captain America, who didn't understand people's hearts, looked confused and shrank back, not intending to participate in it. We're almost there. I'll drop you off near that base. Howard's voice came from the pilot's seat. As an arms magnate, a genius scientist, and a well-known millionaire, it was only natural and logical that he could fly a plane. Howard, I heard Miss Carter say that you are the best pilot she has ever seen. I hope that, when we lower the altitude, this transport plane wouldn't be hit by the artillery fire from the Axis. Luke didn't tie up his parachute bag, unlike Rogers, and prepared for the low jump in advance. He seemed very relaxed, as if what he was about to do wasn't a dangerous rescue mission, but an interesting and exciting field adventure. Starks are the best in everything they do. This is our family tradition. Howard piloted the aircraft, first pulling up and sailing above the clouds, then lowering rapidly in a diving position. The visibility was extremely low under the fog. Doing something like this, Luke had to say that he was a courageous man. Ready to jump, General. I hope from the bottom of my heart that I don't see you on the list of the Allies killed in action. Howard stabilized the plane, and the sound of artillery fire came from below, like the sound of muffled thunder. Relax, Rogers. Our mission is simple, to make sure Bucky survives and rescues the captured soldiers. Opening the hatch, a strong airflow poured in, and Luke comforted Rogers, who was stepping into battle for the first time. It was Captain America's first time, and it was inevitable that he was a little nervous. Boom, boom, boom. The earth seemed to tremble, emitting a mournful sound, and the artillery fire glowed in the night sky. Rogers took a deep breath and said, I'm ready. He pulled the parachute bag tight and leaped. Rogers really can't wait, Luke said jokingly, also ready to jump. Take the transceiver. The Allies will find you by signal. Carter stood at the hatch door and handed Luke the transceiver. The latter said softly, Miss Carter, the overall situation of a war is the accumulation of local advantages. Perhaps these soldiers are insignificant and have little impact, but it's precisely tiny people like them who drive the wheels of history. Luke put the transceiver in his pocket, put the parachute bag on his back, and leaned back. Before falling, he reached out and made a victory gesture to Carter. The whistling wind was like a knife, whipping Luke's Kryptonian battle suit. The dark red cloak rattled like a flying flag. Luke plunged in the face of the heavy fire from below. With this fantastic Kryptonian suit, he was confident that he would be safe even if a shell hit him. The battlefield was located in a dark and dense forest. The artillery fire seemed endless. The soldiers on both sides were shouting and killing each other, releasing the most primitive impulses of the human race. Rogers, open the parachute. Luke's voice was blown away by the wind and reached Captain America's ears intermittently. The latter nodded and pulled open the parachute bag, and a small dark flower bloomed in the air. The speed of descent slowed down. Taking this opportunity, Rogers turned his head and looked at Luke. He was horrified to find that the other party didn't open his parachute at all. At this time, the height is close to 700 meters. Under normal circumstances, the minimum safe altitude for parachuting was 500 meters. This was Carter's advice, and they had to pay attention to timing. Luke, Rogers shouted. The anxious voice came out of his mouth and was immediately blown away by the wind and torn into fragmented pieces. By the time they reached the dangerous moment of a 100-meter height and rapid descent, Luke pulled the parachute under Rogers' shocked gaze. Taking advantage of this buffer, he pulled out the paratrooper knife between his legs and cut the rope. The impact of the fall, which should have been at least partially crippling, didn't have any effect on Luke. Rogers, who landed safely on the ground, sincerely admired him. No wonder Colonel Phillips regarded Luke as the best super soldier, and the two heads of the Allies, President Roosevelt and Britain's Churchill, even called him Superman. At that height just now, Rogers wouldn't dare to try. He may be able to do it, but he has never been trained in skydiving, and it definitely wouldn't be as easy as Luke made it seem. 2 kilometers in this direction, through the trees, is Hydra's base.